Can we come to order again, please? Our final witness today, who's traveled from Manitoba to be with us, and very much appreciated by all committee members, is Carol Delley. Welcome, Ms. Delley. Do you have any opening comments you wish to make before we get into questions?
Just that, given the events of last week, I haven't had a great deal of time to prepare, including the travel and stuff, so this is as kind of condensed as I could get it. I think the issue is so big, trying to put it into a 5-minute statement is pretty difficult, but I'll do my best.
All right, please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the issue of not criminally responsible from the victim's perspective. I will keep this as brief as possible. On July 30th, 2008, my 22-year-old son, Timothy, was brutally and savagely murdered on a Greyhound bus while he slept. His body was completely desecrated, his corpse cannibalized, while the RCMP watched for 4 hours and 48 minutes. It was described as one of the most horrific killings in Canadian history. Since that day, the entire system has been focused on Vince Lee's rights and well-being. The psychiatric community is focused on rehabilitating and reintegrating, to use their own words, this extremely ill individual. Timothy has, for all intents and purposes, been completely forgotten by the system. Why? He is forgotten because NCR cases are removed from the justice system and placed into and overseen by the healthcare systems in each province. Not criminally responsible is a global problem, a national crisis, and it is being handled provincially. I believe the issue of NCR needs to be a federal issue, not provincial, and remain in the justice system, not the medical system. In our first meeting with the Crown, I was told the man who did this to my child came to this country from China in 2001, and that he is as Canadian as I am. As an Aboriginal woman, I found that offensive. I expressed my concerns to the provincial justice minister, and my concerns were disregarded. This raises grave concerns for me because, as the experts have testified, schizophrenia is not an overnight illness. Typically, it takes years to manifest itself. I ask, how did this man manage to get into the country? What kind of screening is in place? I sat in court and heard the killer say, "Not guilty." And his defense attorney says, "No crime was committed here. Vince Lee is not a criminal." My son is no less dead. Under current Canadian law, that is the truth, and that is disgraceful. Fundamentally, I believe that all killers need to be segregated from society, and the only thing that should change is where they serve their time. Mentally ill killers should be in a secure facility specifically designed to treat their illness, not in a mental health facility that is designed to assist those with mental illness who have not committed any crimes. If I needed psychiatric help, I should not have to seek it at a facility housing these dangerous offenders. I've been sifting through several cases of NCR that the families of victims have sent to me. It is fair to say that in most, if not all these cases I've read, the offender has had previous, often frequent interaction with the provincial healthcare systems. The truth is that even when family, friends, co-workers, and associates of the accused have verifiable proof that an individual is suffering from severe mental illness, so long as that very disturbed individual is resistant to treatment, they are under no obligation to get treatment. So essentially, we give the responsibility of a very sick person's well-being and decision-making to that individual, even though they are clearly incapable of making those decisions. Then when they do something wrong, they are not responsible. They cannot and should not have it both ways. If they are so sick as to not appreciate the consequences of their actions, the state must step in and assume responsibility for them. I believe that there needs to be transparency and accountability within the institutions and the professionals caring for these offenders. We need to establish, implement, and enforce a legal mechanism that would require these mentally ill, medication-dependent individuals to treat their illnesses. Failure to do so would result in criminal charges of foreseeable gross negligence causing death. That way there would be a criminal record. Victims' families would have some sense of justice having been served. The offender gets the treatment he clearly requires, and the safety of the community can be ensured. To my knowledge, there have been no improvements to the systems that failed us. And with a severe shortage of mental health care providers in this country, I have no confidence that the system is any better prepared to provide the services to these mentally ill killers out in the community than they were 6 years ago, which led to the death of my son. So again, I ask, who will be monitoring? How will they be monitored? Who is responsible if they reoffend? I want to know why Timothy's basic human right to life and security of his person while on a public mode of transportation is being trumped by the killer's rights. How can we best meet the needs of the offender? When I spoke to the House of Commons last June, I closed with these questions. How are we monitoring? Who is monitoring? What programs and resources are in place to assist these offenders once they are released? Thank you again for the opportunity to bring the concerns of my fellow citizens and communities to the attention of the leadership and policymakers of this country. Miigwech Ikosi, thank you.
Thank you again. We'll begin the questions with Senator McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Delley, my warmest sympathy for the loss of your son.
It's Delley, thank you.
Okay. Before I became a senator, I was chair of the New Brunswick Review Board, and during my tenure, I had the opportunity to do both the fitness and NCR hearings in the case of Gregory Allen Desprez, a young man who killed an elderly couple in Minto, New Brunswick in 2005. As a matter of fact, he decapitated the male victim. I vividly remember the family of Fred Fulton coming into the courtroom and submitting their victim impact statements, and those thoughts are very much in the back of my mind when I'm addressing you. Mr. Desprez is currently held at the Shepherdie Healing Center, which is part of Dorchester Penitentiary in New Brunswick. Mr. Desprez has never admitted the actus reus, that is to say, he has never admitted to the killings, although the evidence was overwhelming. He continues to suffer from chronic paranoid schizophrenia. He takes his medication, but he has no insight into his mental illness. In the case of Vince Lee, my understanding is that he was allowed to leave the mental hospital without an escort. I was reading that his treating psychiatrist was of the opinion that Mr. Lee, who's also suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, has stopped experiencing delusions and is a model nonviolent patient, just like Mr. Desprez is at the present time. He's taking his medication, and so is Mr. Desprez. I understand you don't agree with that decision. Is it because, as in the case of Mr. Desprez, you feel that Vince Lee may take his medication but has no insight into his mental illness? Because if one doesn't have insight, then chances of recuperating are very minimal, as a matter of fact.
Well, my understanding of paranoid schizophrenia is that it is incurable. It is manageable with medications and intensive therapy over 6 years.
You're absolutely correct on that one.
You know, over 6 years of intensive therapy and regularly administered medications in a controlled environment, I would be shocked if he weren't doing very well. And while he's in care and in treatment, he's not a concern. My concern is when he is ultimately released and he's left to his own resources. I have no confidence that the community is able to correctly monitor. And then, depending on where he's living, if he's in a rural or more remote location, the chances of him accessing any programs and et cetera are practically zero. I think that he can be treated and managed to a place where he can live with his own mind. Left to his own recourse, I don't know that that would be the case, and he's already proven himself to be non-compliant. It's indicative of the illness. When they begin to feel well, they stop taking medications. I read somewhere either 75 or 85% will stop taking medications within a 12-month period from the time that they stop or are released. Those numbers scare me. I don't think that we should have to worry about it. I don't think that freedom in the community, especially into a community that has no legal mechanism that would require him to take treatment. They can demand it, they can suggest it, they can make it an condition of his release. But ultimately, there's no legal mechanism requiring him to take it. So if he reoffends, who then is responsible? We already know he's not responsible. The review board isn't going to be responsible. So ultimately, I believe that the responsibility lands on us, the community, to protect not only the innocent victims, but the afflicted individual. He's incurable. I'm sorry for that. Does that mean that I think he should be roaming around free? I don't think so, not ever. Not given what this man did, he went far and beyond what a normal schizophrenic would have even done. He has not recognized, though they say he has insight to his illness, he has not admitted or recognized the cannibalism aspect of it. That's huge.
I agree entirely with you. If a person suffers from chronic paranoid schizophrenia, you cannot cure. You cannot cure that mental illness. All you can do is have that person take his or her medication to keep the mental illness under control. I agree with you entirely, and I'm worried about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Platt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Delley, for coming. I'm a fellow Manitoban, and I watched television while this was happening. I can only say that we feel your pain and certainly feel your fears that Vince Lee is being offered unsupervised passes. I agree with you when you say that it is not curable, it is manageable. And in order for it to be manageable, it has to, he has to be under somebody's care. I read yesterday into the record, I read stats of recidivism, and the stats are high as to people that reoffend, and critics of the bill are saying that isn't so. So I would like you to give us your insight on that a little bit, and I'll just throw one more question at you before you do. Other critics are talking about the stigma. And I would, and I know what your answer will be, but I would like you to share that whether you would not agree that the stigmatization of this heinous crime is the fault of Vince Lee for publicly decapitating and cannibalizing your son, whether he isn't the one responsible if there is stigmatization to the mentally ill as a result of his crime. So those are two questions for you, if you would address them.
Okay, the first one, refresh me.
It's repeat offenders. The
Right.
danger of course, the critics are saying, well, the danger of somebody like this repeating an offense is very low. We had heard stats yesterday of 7%, where I had stats that they were over 30%. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think it's any consolation if you're in that 7% of people that are killed on a reoffense. But nevertheless, on the reoffense as well as the stigmatization.
I think it's criminal to allow an individual who has demonstrated this level of violence and his capabilities to ever have that opportunity to repeat that behavior, ever. So recidivism, I don't know if he'll reoffend. I just don't think he should have the opportunity to do so. Some do, some don't. Some, like the individual who was NCR on the East Coast, who on a 1-hour pass murdered a prominent gay rights activist. I'm sure that's cold comfort to his family that the recidivism rates are so low, blah, blah, blah. That's what I hear when I hear statistics and percentages, particularly coming from the opposition on this case. I don't take any comfort in that. I think that statistics and percentages can be skewed in favor of or against, and I'm just dealing with the straight up facts that I don't think that these individuals should have that opportunity ever, given what he's done, given what he's demonstrated his ability to do, and he's incurable. But what concerns me even more is that if he is ultimately let go and he does do something, there is nothing in place to hold him responsible or anybody else responsible. If Vince Lee is not responsible for what happened to my child, who is? I have a lot of questions and concerns that have not come to answer, and there's probably no good answers for them. Vince Lee immigrated to this country in 2001, or arrived in this country, didn't receive his citizenship until 2005, which is the same year that he was seen and treated for schizophrenia. That concerns me. How did he get into this country? What what is the screening process? What questions were asked or not asked that allowed a severely ill individual like this? This is a disease that takes years and years to manifest, doesn't happen overnight. And yet, it presented very late for Vince Lee. He was seen and walked away from an institution with no follow-up from the mental health care field at that time. They're all there to speak on his behalf and protect him now. Where were they when he was looking for help? And that is a very common occurrence. In fact, all the cases that I have read, and I have read several, in every case, the individual, the perpetrator, has been seen by the system, usually on multiple occasions. There's usually been several confrontations before the index offense, which is how they refer to the slaughter of my child now, the index offense. I have trouble with all the terminology. Was Vince Lee mentally ill, mentally defective, mentally diseased? There are so many different terms, and what do they all mean? Is it all the same? What I do know for sure is what he did to my child, and that he is incurable, and that I believe he needs to be segregated. That's kind of in reference to your first question. The second one was?
The stigma.
I be responsible for the stigma of an individual. This is not stigma. This is fact. This is what he did. That's not a stigma. The stigma surrounding mental illness, I didn't create that. Neither did my son. I don't think this furthers that. I think people want to be protected from individuals that are this seriously ill. Stigma. I don't even know what else to say to that. I don't know what else to say to that.
I appreciate that. Chair, if there's a second round, please.
Thank you. Senator Boisvenu.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Delley, you have interpretation, I believe? Okay. Like my colleague, I want to offer my sincerest condolences on the death of your son. I want to talk about your participation in all the procedures that took place. I have one case in mind. That was somebody who was in a psychiatric care in Trois-Rivières. He had killed and decapitated his parents. The family had to fight hard so that he wouldn't be released. The day that the commission in Quebec released him, he set fire to the hospital. That's how they kept him inside. If I look at statistics on participation of victims in release hearings, it's 0.4% of victims have a word to say in the process. What was your experience with the Mental Health Commission of your province when the person who killed your son asked to be given day passes? Did you have anything to say about it? About his release for day passes? Were you consulted at all?
Consulted, no. No. I had many concerns. We don't generally know what review board, what Vince's treatment team is asking for until either the day of the review board or very shortly before. We don't know what they're asking for until the day that we go in, and really we're just spectators to the procedure. There's very little impact. Even our victims' impact statements are censored. So I have one opportunity to say how I feel, or to address this, and it is censored so as not to offend the offender in his treatment. That's disgusting. He should have to hear how I feel, how he has devastated my family. The trauma and devastation that my family has experienced is not only by my family, but all Canadians. This was so horrific, it captured international headlines. That we go to a review board and have to listen to how well he's doing, what a model patient he is, what a good guy, is very difficult to sit there and listen to have the defense attorney stand up and say, Vince Lee is not a criminal, no crime was committed here. Just because nobody is being held accountable does not mean that the act didn't occur. Somebody did kill my son. And this is disgraceful. A miscarriage of justice for sure, because we haven't had any justice.
Last one. Est-ce que vous pensez que le projet de loi C-14 va assez loin?
Do you think Bill C-14 goes far enough to properly protect victims or their families?
Without that mechanism that would require them to take the medication and treatment, absolutely not. Do I think it's a step in the right direction? Yes, absolutely. Because I'm at the point here where any improvement, anything is going to be better than what we currently have. I'm not surprised by the percentage you told me of victims' families who speak out, because the sense of hopelessness and helplessness that is felt is beyond measure. Don't forget that victims' families are so traumatized and feel that sense of helplessness that they can't speak out. Not only can't they don't want to, because then they get the backlash from the mental health field and everybody else. Guess what? I don't care. I don't care what the backlash is. I know in myself, in my spirit, in my being, that it is my responsibility to do what I can to further protect the remaining members of my family and my community. And that's all I'm trying to do. And I don't think that is best served by Vince Lee walking around free. Not in this lifetime.
Merci.
Rive?
One question, please. Following Senator Boisvenue's question, I understand that you weren't asked your opinion about a release of Vince Lee, except in a very diagonal way to protect him. They didn't want you to express what you and your family experienced and felt. I think that's beyond understanding. I'm wondering whether community or social services in your community, did you or your family get any assistance following this horrible incident? And in everything you had to do following this horrible drama you experienced?
The short answer to that question is that yes, victim services was involved. We were directed and given a list of choices of counseling services that we could access, given in mind that I think it's different in each province, but in each province, the ability to access mental health care is limited. So they would cover, I can't remember if it's 4 or maybe 6 visits to a psychiatric professional for me as a victim. That's barely enough time to get out what happened, let alone be given any tools or resources to use to cope. I chose to access spiritual guidance and counseling through my Aboriginal elder, which I have found extremely helpful, beneficial, and she has remained open 24/7 to me and my family and committed to that, whether she's being paid or not, which is huge, because when I confront the system, if I want to go see a psychiatrist or whatever, first of all, there's a huge waiting list. Then when you get in to see them, I get 6 chances or 6 opportunities to say what's wrong, and then they go, well, your time's up, see ya. Really? And the shortage is so great nationally, not just provincially, but nationally. The number of mental health care providers is extremely low. The number of mentally ill offenders is increasing. The whole thing is very out of balance.
Okay, thank you. Senator Batters.
Thank you very, very much for being here today, Ms. Delley. I was very upset last week to see the news about your son's killer receiving an unescorted day pass, and especially when I learned that the Manitoba government's Crown Prosecutor had not opposed the application. So the provincial NDP Justice Minister in Manitoba, was that Andrew Swan?
Yes.
You told me, or you told us earlier, that he had disregarded your concerns that you had expressed to him.
It was a different Justice Minister at that time. It was
it Dave Chomiak?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Could you please tell us about that?
I should have brought the letter. I sent a letter explaining the situation, and that in my first meeting with the Crown Attorney, I didn't like what she was telling me. Probably wouldn't have liked what anybody was telling me, to be fair. And to be told point blank, blatantly, that Vince Lee was as Canadian as I am, I understand that that's in the eyes of the law. But as an Aboriginal woman who's been here her whole life, has been a tax-paying, law-abiding, contributing member of this society all of these years, to be told that an individual who came from China who hasn't really contributed to our society is more or as Canadian as I am, and now I'm paying taxes to keep the man that did this to my child alive is absurd. Is absurd. I cannot express to you my frustration with that. The financial devastation upon my family, the fact that my husband, who had just stepped into a higher position in his employment, due to the aftermath of the F5 tornado that hit our street the year before, and then my son's murder, given all of that, it was just too much for him. He had to step back and step down from his position at his work. The alcoholism that's now prevalent in my family because of this, because people can't cope. Let me make this very clear. The 30-some-odd witnesses that were on the bus, ranging in age from children to the elderly, the 30, 40-plus emergency personnel that were on the scene that were traumatized by Vince Lee taunting them with my son's head. The devastation and the probably mental illnesses that Vince Lee created in these people that now can't get the help that they're going to require. But we're really focused on taking really good care of him, and we're going to make sure he gets all the therapy and counseling and blah, 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 blah. That's all good and fine. But keep him in a locked institution where he can continue to get that and we can feel safe.
Okay, and just very briefly, we will not forget your son, and I wanted to give you a short opportunity to just tell us a bit about Tim McLean, about your son.
That's really refreshing, thank you, because for the most part, it is all about Vince Lee. His picture in the paper is this big all the time on the front page, and then there might, if there is, there might be a little square like this with one of Timothy's images. Timothy was my wild child without question. He was the joker. He was funny. He had a wicked sense of humor. He was fearless. He jumped into everything with both feet. He was intelligent, very, very bright, but bored in school. He had read everything in the school library by the time he was in grade 5. So academically, when he got into high school, he wasn't challenged and dropped out. He chose to travel with the carnival. It gave him opportunity to travel and meet lots of new and interesting people, and he wasn't afraid to do that. He was afraid of flying, which is why he took the bus. He was a remarkably funny kid, and from the time he was little, I swear to God, from the time he was little, he would always say to me, "I'm going to be famous one day, Mom. I'm going to be famous one day, Mom." It was one of the last things he said to me because he had dropped out of high school. He very much encouraged our youngest child, Kendall, his younger brother, to finish school, and Kendall struggled with school very much. But he did graduate, and Timothy came to Kendall's graduation in June of that year. And I am very grateful to have had that evening with him, because the last words that we exchanged were, "I love you." And as he was walking away from me to go to the parkade, he turned around and he said, "I'm going to be famous one day, Mom." I never knew that it would be his last day that would make him famous.
Yeah.
And I miss him.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Senator Dagenet.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Delley, for your great courage appearing before us today and talking to us about everything. It takes a lot of great courage. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of a similar case that I saw in Quebec, Mr. Yan Lee, who was cut up by Mr. Lucaroga Magnota. And I was mandated by the government to assist the mass, the commemorative mass, in order to meet the parents of that student. And I understand how devastated you are, and I understand the courage that it requires to appear here. Now, my question, there was a murder. You are all victims, you and your family, your entourage. How did you, I mean, I know how it happened, everything that happened after that, but now you know that there is another event that's traumatizing you, a new tragedy, the fact that he's being released. How do you feel?
re-victimized yet again, and I feel, excuse me, Timothy will not have been dead for 6 years until July 30th of this year. We have been through the trial and 6 review board hearings already. Each time, it's like being re-victimized because we feel like the system doesn't give a shit anyway about us. Pardon my French, my language. It's difficult to go each time knowing that there is nothing that can be done anyways, that the system, the way it is set up, doesn't allow for anything different. That's why I fight. That's why I want to create change in Timothy's memory so that many other people can be saved, and the individuals requiring the treatment need to be protected from the public, need to be protected from their own illness, and we need to keep them safe as well. I don't jump on the bandwagon with people who want to reinstate the capital punishment, but I do think that if you're going to make a commitment to treating this person, if they're incurable and it's a lifelong illness, they need to be kept and held forever, for the rest of their natural life, in a facility that will ensure that that treatment continues.
Merci beaucoup, madame.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Caught the gist of concerns here very well when you talked about giving the responsibility of a very sick person's well-being and decision-making to that individual. And then when they do something wrong, they're not responsible. And, you know, I think that's been a common theme, even from witnesses who are not overly supportive of the legislation, the fact that there's so much frequent interaction with the mental health system, no obligation to seek treatment, and the seriousness of offenses gradually increases. You know, it's really a legal question, but I'm just wondering if you've been such a vocal, you know, commentator with respect to the weaknesses of mental health legislation in this country. I wonder if that's an issue that you've been able to speak to anyone about. Is there any way that perhaps this committee could address that particular situation with this? I'm thinking specifically of the right to refuse treatment. It's an issue that I spoke out about and against when the Mental Health Act was changed in Toronto quite a number of years ago to allow this to occur. So I'm just wondering if it's an issue that you've had any opportunity to look at in depth.
Well, I have been so focused on just trying to raise awareness to the issue that I haven't had opportunity to do that. I think it's ridiculous that we would give the decision to a person who has clearly indicated that they're incapable of making that decision. That's, to me, that's, again, pardon me for the expression, but I think that's crazier than the person that did it in the first place. To then go to that person and say, you know, you're going to be free. It's up to you whether or not you want to continue treatment or medication. I understand that that's not the way it's going to be told to him. He's going to be told that he's required or we can demand it of him, like I said. But if there's no legal mechanism, then everybody else's hands are tied. Mm-hmm. If he can be found not responsible and then is given the choice not to take his medications and does that and reoffends, shame on us for allowing that to happen.
And you mentioned earlier as well in response to one of the questions about there's no recourse if someone actually does what you just suggested, commits another serious crime. They're exempt from civil liability. As I understand it, they cannot be sued.
Well, he's already proven himself to be non-compliant, and yeah, no,
I'm talking about the review board members themselves who
right.
make these release decisions. They're
well,
exempt from civil liability.
Yeah, exactly. I don't, you know, if Vince Lee can't be held responsible and the review board can't be held responsible and the mental health system can't be held responsible, I mean, I know that my ex-husband launched a lawsuit, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks after Timothy was killed. I don't have any say in that, and I'm not given information on how that is transpiring. But I understand that the government and RCMP have been dropped from the lawsuit, and Vince Lee and Greyhound are the only ones now being sued. That's all I know about that.
Senator From?
Just didn't want you to leave without me just expressing to you like what a wonder you are. You're just amazing, and I know your son will be so proud of what you're doing. What a great advocate you are. I'm curious to know specifically, once this measure comes into force, whether or not it's going to be able to affect your particular situation. I understand the Crown would have to appeal.
I don't know what the steps are that would have to transpire in order to ensure that Vince Lee stays locked up, or if it'll even be retroactive to do that. I don't know. That's not in my hands. I wish it were.
Thank you.
Well, I think we've wrapped up, and this has been, I think an emotional appearance on your part, and I think it's impacted members of the committee as well. As mentioned, very, very courageous. And I think it's fair to say you've made a significant contribution to our hearings on this legislation.
Thank you.
And you've also given us I think, a great deal to think about. One of the things the committee has the opportunity to do when we complete our hearings is to add observations to the report back to the Senate. And I think you've given us a number of, I think, worthwhile areas for discussion that we could perhaps incorporate in that report to the Senate. So a heartfelt thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, ladies, we're now adjourned.